complexes. The Diocletian baths could hold 3,000 people at one time. There was hot rooms and cold rooms and steam rooms. There was exercise equipment. There was vendors selling their wares. There was also all the noise on the street below. You know, it wasn't New York City construction loud, but it was pretty close. Right? We'd like to think the ancient world was quiet, but it was anything but. And so Seneca, he puts himself in this difficult challenge, and he's writing. And by the way, that's not the only noise he hears. His life is falling apart. Nero is insane. Everything's going sideways for him, and yet he's working on his ability to concentrate. That's his challenge. You could do a marathon, you could lift heavy weights, but can you focus? Can you lock in? Can you concentrate like a Roman, as Marcus Aurelius said? That's the rare thing these days. That's what we don't see enough of. The irony is I find when I do these physical challenges, I do some of my best thinking. It's why I take my walks. It's why I go running. It's why I swim. That's where I concentrate. Funny, I was at a gym one time and I got recognized, and I was getting out of the pool, and the guy said, "Oh, I just read Ego is the Enemy. I really liked it." And I said, "I wrote that book in this pool." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I did it. That's where I would go. It's not as quiet and serene as my office, but it was the perfect place for me to lock in and focus. The other line from the Stoics that pertains to Circus Maximus comes to us from Epictetus, who obviously wasn't sitting in an owner's box as he watched the races, probably had no interest in what was happening here whatsoever. But he said, look, if you want to win, you should only run in races where winning is up to you. Right? This comes back to the Stoic idea of what's in your control and what's outside your control. If needing to be first, needing to beat other people, if needing to get the perfect score from the judges, or in my case, hit the bestseller list, if you're focused on any of the parts of it that are not up to you, that are up to the critics or the scorecard or the other competitors, well then you're vulnerable. You are needing, hoping, desiring things that are external to you. But if your goal is to do your best, if your goal is to push your limits, if your goal is to learn something about yourself, if your goal is to check a box, then winning is up to you. Then you're going to succeed no matter what. And that's a good metaphor for life. I think about this as an author. My goal is to write the best book that I possibly can, to grow from the process, to be made better for it. And then, depending on where it hits on the list or how many copies it sells, that's all extra. Same goes for when I run. Am I pushing myself? Am I challenging myself? Am I having fun? Am I learning? All that. Then how my times stack up to someone else, how I place if it is in a race, all of that is extra. That's an important reminder from Seneca.
One platform, 4 ways in. Feeling confident? Stellar, 1 step, 1 target, no time limit. Access in as little as 1 phase. Prefer your own pace? Stellar 2-step. 2 phases, extended parameters, no daily restrictions. Maybe you're on a budget, but you've got the skill. Stellar Light, lowest targets, lowest entry point, same published rules. But what if you want to just skip to the main event? Stellar Instant, no challenge phase, simulated account access from day 1. Different challenges designed for different traders. Take the next step with Funded Next.
From Seneca. On the road in front of the Forum, there's a bunch of statues of some of the most famous and eminent Romans. Julius Caesar, Augustus, Trajan, all the famous emperors. And it would have looked something like this in the ancient world too. There would have been not just emperors, but senators and generals and patrons of the arts. But Marcus Aurelius wanted to make a point about these so-called famous people, the ones that we look up to. We're told, for instance, that Julius Caesar once saw a statue of Alexander the Great and broke down weeping in front of him because Alexander the Great in that statue was younger than he was in that moment, and he had already conquered the world. And this made Julius Caesar immensely jealous. But Marcus Aurelius actually addresses that in Meditations. He says, in Book 8, he says, Alexander and Caesar and Pompey, 3 of the most famous Romans. He says, compared with Diogenes, with Heraclitus and Socrates. He said, the philosophers knew the why, and the how. He said, their minds were their own. He said, the others, the great generals, the people with the statues, he said, they knew nothing but anxiety and enslavement. Enslavement sounds like a pretty strong word, considering there literally were slaves here, but Seneca makes a similar point. He's talking about Marius, one of Rome's great generals and dictators. He said, Marius commanded armies, but ambition commanded Marius. He says we're all a slave to something, and in fact that idea of ambition, of the need to be powerful, to have the most, to be remembered, to be commemorated, right? To be in the room where it happens, to be in the mix, to be necessary, to be relevant. These are timeless desires and urges. They're also traps. Seneca talks about, old lawyers who can't retire, who are still begging for one more case, one more crack at being the talk of the town. And so all these things were happening then, and they're still happening now. But Marcus Aurelius is saying that philosophy gives us the clarity, gives us the perspective, gives us the truth to break out of this trap, to see what actually matters, to see what's actually important, to live a simpler life, a more contemplative life, a more public service-oriented life, not about aggrandizement and achievement and accomplishment, but, actually making a difference for people, actually maybe getting to know your kids, being around, being home. You only get one life. And so to spend it enslaved, to spend it in harness, worst of all, a harness you put on yourself and that you could take off at any time. The Stoics saw this as particularly tragic and sad, and most of all, it was avoidable.
I have cut for all over me.
I've talked a bunch about getting up early, the power of getting up, getting after it in the morning. But make no mistake, I think sleep is super, super important. Not just what time you go to bed, but how you sleep. And a big part of my sleep routine is my 8 sleep. I love it. My wife loves it. You can have different sides, cool at different temperatures. It's even how I wake up in the morning. Instead of an annoying alarm clock or that, horrible sound on your phone lightly buzzes you awake, and then when you're up, you want to turn it off. Tap the mattress. There's all sorts of awesome features in my 8 sleep. It was worth every penny. I love it. You can use the code DailyStoic.
No, why are you deleting the message? Why are you deleting
right now for up to $500 off? And if you have an HSA or an FSA, some 8 sleep stuff qualifies for that as well. Through TrueMed and qualified customers save about 30% on average. Check your eligibility at TrueMed.com/8sleep before you buy. TrueMed is for qualified customers, HSA and FSA tax savings.
Ooh, you have a lot of negative energy coming out of your soul.
When I'm watching the game,
Good,
I'm present, I'm enjoying it, and I'm learning
Cleanse
things,
your
I'm just
soul.
watching excellence
Release that
play out.
negativity, okay?
That's great. But when I'm reading the news the week
Ooh,
before
you're still
about who's
hating?
hurt
You're still
or
hating?
what the plans
Oh my
are,
God.
what people are speculating is going to
Let me
happen,
just ignore your
that's
ex.
when I remind myself I'm kind of just totally wasting my time. Because nothing I learn in the days preceding up to the game is going to change what happens during the game, because I'm not the GM or the coach or on the field, right? I think about this with the election. I know what I want to happen. I know who I'm obligated to vote for. Watching the news play out in real time, every late-breaking development, every gaffe, every disaster, every frustrating thing, all that's doing is making me crazy and not changing the outcome in any way. In fact, what it's doing is taking me away from my actual family and my actual job and things that I might do in the real world to bring about that outcome. So I think enjoying things, watching things, whatever, as long as it doesn't become this kind of pseudo reality that it's so easy to live in. To me, that's my relationship and the way that I think about those things, right? I will say Marcus Aurelius did not enjoy the gladiatorial games, and he was often seen writing his philosophical meditations at the Colosseum, to the chagrin of most Romans who were, rather bloodthirsty. I think there's a difference between that and, what we watch on the pitch or the field or the court. Between that and, what we watch on the pitch or the field or the court.
So this is the Kesselis family tomb. They came to Bastrop in the 1850s, and they built a little building on Main Street, which housed a shop that he owned, and he built a house down the street. His son, Will, this is him, That's the father. This is Will. Carried on the business when his father died in 1901. Well, I own that building now. The building has changed hands dozens of times in the decades since it left the Kesselis family, which, by the way, is what happens to all our possessions. The things you love, the things you care about, eventually someone is going to possess them. That is to say, if they don't throw them away. There's a story about Epictetus. He had this lamp that was stolen, and you'd think he'd be upset. Instead, he goes, look, you can only lose what you have. And he goes back and he replaces it the next day with something cheaper. But the funny part is that after he died, one of his students bought it for a lot of money. He wanted to possess something that Epictetus had possessed. Of course, totally missing the point of the lesson. Now, again, the lesson isn't you should never have anything and you shouldn't care about anything. You should give away all your possessions like a monk. No, it's just a reminder that as the Stoics say, we only own this stuff in trust. We have it temporarily, not just the job, not just the house, not just the place we currently stand or operate, but everything in our life is only ours for as long as we are lucky to have it. I heard someone say, and I think about this with where I live on this ranch out not far from here, he says, the bank is just letting me make payments on it. Like, you don't even own it. You have it temporarily. And if you can think about it that way, you're not only going to be more insured against the ups and downs in life, you're going to know the proper perspective on things. It helps me relax with my children. I don't have to take everything so seriously. I don't have to stress about everything. I don't own it. We remind ourselves that we don't really own this stuff, that it's only ours temporarily. So the day when we have to give it up, whether it's while we're living or at the end of our life, we're okay with that. We're okay giving it back. I actually had a friend of mine who died not that long ago, and he wrote about this saying, I'm ready to give the gift back. That's what he was saying about his life itself, ready to return the gift. And that's a very Stoic idea. All of it, it's only temporary. We only get it for a little bit. As we wrap up here, I wanted to give you, I think, what the most important practice I always try to leave people with from the Stoics, which is this idea of memento mori, right? Remember that you are mortal. The Roman emperor had someone whisper this in their ear at their highest moments. Remember that you are mortal, that you are not a god, that you are a human being. I carry a ring with me. I'm wearing it right now. It says memento mori, and on the inside has a quote from Marcus. He says, let that determine what you do and say and think. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Of course, we all know we're going to die on some level, right? Obviously, everyone who's ever born will die. That's the one prophecy that's never failed. And yet, the Stoics would say we get it wrong to think of death as this thing in the future. Right? It's not some distant thing that will happen to you when you're old. I mean, it can happen to you at any moment. But Seneca would say we have to see death as something that's ever present, right? In the midst of life, we are in death. Not just because people can die, things like plagues or pandemics can happen, tragedies can happen. But he would say that the time that passes belongs to death. That once time passes, it's dead to us forever. As we kill time, time kills us. He says we're dying every minute, we're dying every day. So the reason we have to say no, right? The reason we have to design our lives, the reason we have to be conscious of where we're going and what we're doing, so we don't know how long we have. Don't know how long we have. The Stoics say we have to balance the books of life each day to make sure we're spending this time wisely. We're making a positive difference with it. We're using the gift for what it is. It's a gift. And I was in Waverly Cemetery today. Look, if that's where you go when you die, I guess there's worse things that could happen. But all those people, right? All those people, they saw death as something that would happen eventually, inevitably. And then it came to them one day all too soon, as it does to all of us. It comes as a surprise, even though we know it's always going to be there. Maybe we thought we were too healthy, too important, or we thought we're working on something that's going to outlive us. It doesn't do Marcus Aurelius any good that we're talking about him, He says people who long for posthumous fame forget that they won't be around to enjoy it. And he says the people in the future are also stupid and annoying. And, The point is, Marcus Aurelius survives and endures not because that's what he chased, but because of what he did with the time that he had and who he was with that time. And that has to be enough. We're dying every minute, we're dying every day. You could leave life right now, let that determine what you do and say and think.
can you help me with my workout? Mom. Hello. Hello. Are you okay? Whew. Whew.
This book right here has been the
Oh my
guide
God,
for
you love
presidents
what I'm
and
listening
generals
to?
and
Yeah,
leaders
that's
for
nice.
almost
I love
20
it too.
centuries. Theodore Roosevelt carried it with him as he explored a South American jungle. Frederick the Great took it into battle. Arnold Schwarzenegger says
the
it
Dean
shaped
Stoic?
how he thinks. But the fascinating thing about
You
it is
can
it was
search it up on
never
YouTube.
meant to be read by anyone.
If you
It was
want.
one man writing to himself, and that man happened to be the Emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful person on the planet. And that's what we're going to talk
I'm
about
almost
today,
done with
the
my
best
water.
lessons from Marcus Aurelius's meditations, and most importantly, how to actually use them.
Whew. Lord help
I think one of the reasons we have trouble with motivation is that we know deep down that this
How
thing
you
we're
guys
doing,
doing?
it
Where
doesn't
you
really
watching
matter. It's
from?
not important. That's why Marcus Aurelius's
Where you
question
watching
is so imperative. He
from?
says, ask yourself, is this essential? He says,
Make sure
because
to
most
check
of what
out
we
my
do and say and think
videos.
is not
I
essential.
posted a
It's
video
getting us
yesterday.
further from where we want to go. It's
posted
something
a
that
vlog
society made up for us.
yesterday.
It's just what everyone else is
And
doing.
you can check
It's
it
piddly
out.
busy work. You know, he says, are you really afraid of death because you won't be able to do this thing anymore? Right? He's saying that we waste our time with frivolous, unimportant,
lawyer.
meaningless
Thank
things.
you.
So he says, when you ask yourself, you end up
Ooh,
eliminating
Barbados,
the
that's
inessential.
nice.
And then he
That's
says
so
you get this
cool.
double benefit of doing the essential things better. But I would say that the real benefit is that if we only have a finite amount of motivation, if getting up the motivation, if
another
maintaining
set of
motivation is this difficult task, well, then we
lunges.
want to save it for the precious few things that really matter, right? What's the main thing for you? You eliminate the things that are not the main thing, and then that marshals more resources, more energy, more motivation for the things that are the main thing. If everything is this battle between the higher self and the lower self, right? If you're exhausting that resource battling for things that don't matter, that you don't actually care about, that you could say no to, right? You're gonna have so much more motivation than someone who has winnowed down their frame of reference, their to-do list, only to the things that truly matter, that truly are essential. Marcus Aurelius had a lot to complain about. A lot goes wrong. He doesn't meet with the good fortune that he deserved. He's betrayed, he's misled, people lie to him, people try to take things from him. He has a job that he doesn't even want. And yet nowhere in Meditations, what he thinks is his private diary that no one is gonna read, we never once see him complain about any of it. He doesn't complain about being unappreciated. He doesn't complain about being abused. He doesn't complain about being put upon. He doesn't complain about the stress. He doesn't do any of it. Because, as he says in Meditations, we should never be overheard complaining, not even to ourselves.
I want to challenge you to create a $373 a day online side hustle with me live over the course of 5 days. No experience needed. You don't need to show your face. If you have an internet connection and a computer, that's everything that you need. And the best part, AI handles all the heavy lifting. So that way you can do this in your spare time. The first time I ran an event like this, the people who attended and applied what I taught generated over $8.9 million in tracked earnings in just 90 days. The second time,
To ourselves. There's a secret to not getting upset, to not getting angry, to not getting offended, to not being bothered, to focus and to concentration. And it's simple. It comes to us from Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor. He said, you always have the power to have no opinion. He says, things are not asking to be judged by you. Don't turn this into something. The fewer opinions you have, the fewer judgments you make, the more you're able to just leave things as they are, the happier you will be, the more productive you will be, the more focused you will be, and the easier you will be to get along with. This one is fitting here as the ocean crashes behind me. He says, to be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over, It stands unmoved and the raging of the sea falls still around it, right? Stoicism is not the absence of emotion, but it is about that even keel, not getting too high and not getting too low. It's actually funny, the Buddhists have a different image. They talk about if you grabbed a cup of water from the ocean or a river or a lake, it would be hard to see at first. But if you let it sit for a second, eventually it would settle down and that water would become clear. That's what Marcus Aurelius is talking about. The world is going to be noisy. The world is going to be loud. A lot of things are going to happen. But if you take a minute, if you pause and reflect, if you give things a second to settle down, if you don't get lifted up by them or dragged down by them, eventually you get to a level set, a kind of point of clarity. And in a way, that's what Marcus Aurelius is doing in Meditations itself. Whenever you're anxious, whenever you're worried, whenever you're stressed out, whenever you're doubting, you know what you're doing? You're extrapolating. And the ancient Stoics would say that extrapolation is the enemy. Marcus Aurelius tried to remind himself when his kids got sick, he said, my kid is sick. I don't need to tell myself they're going to die from it. He says you can't let your life be crushed by your imagination as a whole. You can't picture every bad thing that could possibly happen. You have to stick with what's in front of you. You have to stick with what is in your control. The anxiety is not being caused by the external thing, the Stoics would say. The anxiety is within us. We are the common variable between all the things that worry us, between all the things that upset us, between all the things that convince us the world is ending. We are the common variable. We are bringing ourselves, our opinions, we are projecting our feelings onto objective events. So stop doing that. Stop extrapolating. Focus on what's in front of you. Stick with idea and action and utterance, the Stoics say. That is plenty to keep you busy. Getting up early is no fun. It's hard every single time. I don't enjoy it while I am doing it, but I am almost always glad after that I did. One of the most famous passages in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is him struggling to do precisely that. He says, at dawn, when you awake and you have trouble getting out of bed, he says, you have to tell yourself, I was meant to do things. I have to get after it. And then he says, but it's so much warmer here under the covers. And indeed, it is. It's nicer there. But he says, is that what you were put here to do, to huddle under the covers? Is that what you were put here to do, to feel nice? No, you were meant for something more than that. And by the way, you know what's nicer than staying in bed? What you experience in the morning, when it's quiet out, when the sun is coming out, when you're the only one on the trail, when you're the only one on the road, when you've got quiet time to focus and work or read or spend time with people you love, that's amazing. So getting up early is hard, sure, but you'll be glad that you did it. Trying hard things, focusing, getting after stuff, that's hard, but you'll be glad you did it after. Concentrate like a Roman, Marcus Aurelius says. Concentrate on doing the thing in front of you as if it was the last thing you were doing in your life. I think about that pretty often. It's the idea of, it's not that you're gonna die tomorrow for sure, but that it could be the last time you send this email. It could be the last time you have this conversation. It could be the last time that I sit down to write or that I sit down to make a video. So am I gonna be fully present? Am I going to concentrate? Am I going to do my job? Am I going to meet the standards of my people, of my profession, of my family, whatever it is? I'm going to concentrate like a Roman. I'm going to do it like this thing matters, like I might not get another opportunity to do it. To me, that's the test. That's the standard to try to meet every day that you are lucky enough to be alive. You're being crazy letting them determine whether you did a good job or not, whether you're happy or not, whether you're a success or not. Marcus Aurelius says ambition is tying your happiness to what other people do and say and think. Sanity, he says, is tying it to your own actions. Like when I work on my books, the writing of the book is up to me. How it does on the bestseller list, what people think about it, what the reviews say, that isn't up to me. So my definition of success is an internal one. I'm focused on the parts that I control. Do I want other people to like it and care about it? Sure, I guess it's nice to have, but it's extra. It's not why I do it, because to need it is to be insane and, of course, incredibly vulnerable. Like a lot of people, I have a tendency to overwork, to overdo, to overcommit, to take things too intensely. Marcus Aurelius warns himself against this in Meditations, and it's stuck with me always. He says, in your actions, don't procrastinate. In your conversations, don't confuse. In your thoughts, don't wander. In your soul, don't be passive or aggressive. In your life, don't be all about business. Don't be all about business. When Marcus Aurelius talks about taking Plato's view in Meditations, what view is he talking about? We don't know the tallest peak that Marcus Aurelius ever gets to, but he might have been talking about something like this. I'm on the hill next to the Acropolis, which is right there. And you think about how unique that perspective of getting the bird's eye view would have been in the ancient world. But up here, you get up and you see how tiny everything is, right? Even the Acropolis looks small behind me. Here's an ancient tombstone, right? From another hill, you see the insignificance of something like that, how it blends in with all the others. But you also see how on top of each other everyone is, how interconnected human beings are. You could have looked out here to the Aegean Sea and thought about how small even Xerxes' fleet was as it amassed off the coast. Marcus Aurelius talks about taking Plato's view for the same reason that astronauts talk about the overview effect. When they see the Earth as a blue marble, suddenly borders fall away and petty ambitions fall away. And what's left, the astronauts tell us, is a sense of global consciousness, of interconnection, of peace and stillness. We have to actively cultivate this. Again, in the ancient world, they didn't have the luxury of staring out of the window of an airplane or hitting the button in an elevator and getting way up there. No, they had to make a hike like this. They had to do a climb like this. But to get up there and imagine Marcus Aurelius is looking down on Athens, the city he admired his whole life, even though he's the emperor of Rome. All he wanted to do was come to Greece. He comes to Greece and he's looking down, and suddenly this ancient civilization, this formerly huge empire, would have looked very puny to him, very insignificant to him. He would have realized how many thousands of people had made the same trek up the same hill, how many tombs and crypts and memorials and monuments and statues there were up and down, and how they all blend together into a kind of insignificance when you get at it from the right angle. And what's left is just human beings. What's left is society. That's all you see from this angle, and that being the most important thing. Look, a person can change, but people don't change. You can change, but the world abideth forever. It is undefeated. It is exactly the same as it ever was and ever will be. This is what we see in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. His complaints about humanity are the exact same complaints we have today. People complain, people are dishonest, people are jealous, people are lazy, people are loud. People
See you
are
tomorrow.
people, right? We've been waiting on the world to change for a very long time, and it doesn't. This is why Marcus Aurelius reminds himself, don't go around expecting Plato's Republic. That's not where you live. That's not how things work. This isn't about being cynical, but in deciding not to be naive,